I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. The individuals who are responsible for the death of Brian Sicknick are set to be sentenced this Friday, and the family of Brian Sicknick is certainly not holding back their message to these terrorists in the sentencing process. And one of the things that the family member said in their sentencing memorandum submitted to the federal judge is the following, quote, "The two defendants, I will not use their name as it humanizes them. Humans have names. Dogs have names. Pet rocks are given names. The two defendants are not worthy of having names or being addressed as such. Came to Washington, D.C. that day looking for a fight. They brought with them chemical sprays, plural. They were not there to be peaceful. What they did was not an accident. It was not a lapse of judgment. Make no mistake that what they did is who they are." And these two individuals who are set to be sentenced on Friday, one is Julian Khater, the other is George Tanios, both from West Virginia. They rented a car. They arrived at the insurrection. George Tanios brought with him in his backpack chemical spray, the bear spray, also the bear repellent, pepper spray, and mace. And that is what was ultimately used by Julian Khater against Brian Sicknick, and also he attempted to use it on Capitol Police Officer Caroline Edwards as well. If we go to the plea agreement that was ultimately entered by these two terrorists, it describes their horrific conduct of what took place. And specifically, it talks about how on January 5th of 2021, Tanios, he was preparing for his trip to Washington, D.C., purchased 2 canisters of the bear spray, 2 additional canisters of pepper spray. Co-defendant Tanios was in contact by cellular phone with the other defendant, Julian Khater, before the purchase, so they coordinated getting this. On January 6th, the two of them attended the rally that was led by Donald Trump, where he told everybody we're going to the Capitol building. The defendants carried with them the canisters of pepper spray and the bear repellent. At 2:09 p.m., Tanios was walking on restricted grounds from the South Grassy area of the United States Capitol grounds toward the Lower West Terrace. The defendant was walking behind Tanios. After separating briefly, they reunited at approximately 2:14 p.m., and then Julian Khater says, "Give me that bear shit," and then reaches into Tanios's backpack and retrieve the canister of bear spray. And then he goes and he's standing across from Brian Sicknick and Caroline Edwards and also Metropolitan Police officers. And then it talks about eventually how they deployed the spray towards these officers. And you'll recall that Brian Sicknick passed the day after having a heart attack as a result of the experiences that he had the day before, based on the assault by these individuals. And so Julian Khater was charged with a felony for assaulting police officers. The sentencing memorandum by the Department of Justice, the ultimate charge, and this may seem to you a bit shocking and surprising, but because the coroner ruled Officer Sicknick's death to be of natural causes, even though it was clearly caused by the trauma he experienced the day before, the Department of Justice was not able to secure a plea agreement or go to trial on a murder charge. What they were able to secure was a plea agreement based on the assault of the police officer. And so they're seeking what would be pretty much on the high end of the sentencing memorandum, which is 90 months in prison. And I expect the federal judge, to give around 90 months for Julian Khater. George Tanios is facing less time because he was not the individual who actually deployed it, although he was an accomplice. And for those who watch the MeidasTouch Network, you know that here As I talk about it, the sentencing guidelines are what has to be followed by the Department of Justice. They can't really deviate from what the sentencing guidelines call for. But as you know, I've been very critical of the law. And it's not the DOJ's fault, per se. They have to follow what the sentencing guidelines are. But it's always been my view that these insurrectionists should be getting at least, at a minimum, 20 years in prison, and likely should be serving significantly more time when they engage in conduct like this, assaulting a police officer with bear repellent, which results in the officer's death. I mean, the fact that we're only talking about 90 months is ludicrous. But now that you know some of the background of who these terrorists are who are being sentenced on Friday, let me just read from you a little bit more of the sentencing memorandum that are written and submitted by family members who talk about what took place. And so this is from Brian Sicknick's older brother, Craig Sicknick rather. This is what he says. And this is written to the court, but also written to both Tanios and Julian Khater. On January 6, 2021, you decided to follow former President Trump down a dark path with many other misguided miscreants. I really would like to know how someone can be so easily duped into doing the dirty work of another with no facts, no potential rewards, and a high likelihood of facing serious repercussions for one's actions. Was it fun? Did you really think you would be rewarded for your idiotic efforts? Over 2 years have passed since your actions led to the death of my brother. Did you think you would wind up here in this courtroom after being involved in the first insurrection in U.S. history? Do you think you would bask in the glory of Trump's stupidity? I wish I were not in the same room as you make me physically sick. Your actions that day led to the death of my kid brother, who was by any measure more of a man than you will ever hope to be. Not a day goes by where I am not reminded of your actions. I start every day by coming down the stairs of my home and seeing a painting of Brian in his United States Capitol Police uniform, a slight smile on his face, reminding me of what my family and our nation has lost. He was 42, far too young to die, especially due to the actions of a madman and psycho-fan followers. After looking at the painting for a moment, I turn on the morning news before work. More often than not, I am reminded again of your actions with some bit of news on Trump, the January 6th committee, or another piece of evidence of January 6th in which you willingly participated with misplaced rage and a cultish desire to follow your narcissist in chief, willingly attacking Brian and his fellow officers who were simply doing their job, protecting the Capitol building and those within it on the day that has been one of peaceful transition since our country was founded. And it goes on, but that's from Craig Sicknick. This is from Brian Sicknick's partner, Sandra Garza, who was with him for a very, very long time. She goes, since the insurrection and since Brian Sicknick's death on January 7th, I have seen zero remorse from either of these defendants. I have not heard any statement of sorrow for participating in the insurrection, for assaulting my longtime partner of over 11 years, or any statement from any of their family members. I find this reprehensible. I understand that their attorneys probably advised them not to make any statements regarding Brian, but from a place of humanity, this is not acceptable and disturbing. Expressing sorrow for the passing of someone to their loved one is not an expression of guilt, but an expression of being human. I know if I assaulted someone or participated in the planning of someone who was assaulted who later died, I would be filled with remorse, pain, and anguish. Clearly, these two defendants do not feel any empathy. Any sorrow they may feel is for themselves and the consequences they now face. This is further demonstrated by their action in the days leading up to January 6th and the day of. Both defendants went to great lengths to plan their attack on law enforcement, with defendant Khater having full knowledge that defendant Tanios was going to a gun store to purchase items for the insurrections. Tanios originally tried to buy firearms, but when he was told he was not legal to buy the gun store manager, he still would not back down and tried to buy pepper ball guns. When that failed because he was told those weren't legal either, exasperated, he settled on buying 4 cans of 2 types of bear spray. Then it goes on to say, once Brian was sprayed in the face, he was incapacitated. Khater and Tanios thought nothing of the fact that approximately over 30,000 angry people were wanting law enforcement officers' heads, and that while he was incapacitated, he could easily be overpowered and rioters could have taken his gun. This angers me that even after he was sprayed in the face, they continued to stay in the crowd having no remorse for what occurred. Further, after the dust settled and defendants Tanios and Khater left the grounds, for months they knew Brian had died, knew they participated in the insurrection, and they did not turn themselves in to the FBI. Here's a photo of Khater with the bear spray. So sentencing is going to be taking place on Friday. We'll keep you posted of what the results are, but wanted to read you from some of the sentencing memorandums submitted by the family, and we will, of course, report to you what happens at the sentencing, where I expect these two terrorists to get the higher end of what is being asked for by the Department of Justice here. It's also worth noting that a few weeks back, the family on January 5th, the family of Brian Sicknick, the estate of Brian Sicknick, actually brought by Sandra Garza, his partner of 11 years, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Donald Trump, against George Tanios, and against Julian Khater for wrongful death. And that case is currently pending in federal courts, a civil lawsuit for wrongful death in Washington, D.C., and we did a video when that lawsuit was filed. You can go find it. We'll keep you posted on what happens in the civil lawsuit as well. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your incredible support. Hit subscribe now. Also, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We have a lot of exclusive content there, but most importantly, it helps grow this independent media platform. So check it out. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
Our blue wall stopped the red wave and election deniers got denied election. That's why we're celebrating with the new Democracy Prevails team. We've got lots of work to do, but we should all be proud that when democracy was tested, democracy prevailed. You've earned this. Don't wait. Get yours right now at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.